Thank you. Thank everyone. Thank all of you for spending this part of your day with me. I appreciate it. So I never know these days what I'm going to talk about in my speeding up life of change. And it's been pretty intense here in the United States for the last 2 or 3 weeks. And Linda was requesting that I finally give her a title, and I think it was a few days after the events in Charlottesville, which I was pretty shaken by in some ways. And so there's a woman I know here. Those of you on the West Coast probably know about this, but there's a woman I know here who was involved. I'll tell the story first. 2 or 3 months ago in Portland, Oregon, Portland has a train line that people use to quickly get around the city. And so there was a guy on the train one night, and seen the photos of him, a long-haired guy, and he was harassing two young Muslim women. It turned out that he was a known, what they call him, white supremacist. He was hassling these women, and some guys started coming up to him and trying to intercede and trying to get him to leave the train. And three guys, and he stabbed all three of them with knives. One of them died on the train. Another one died, I think, the next day or later on. One was in the hospital and survived. Well, it turns out, I first heard about this and it was kind of shocking, especially because Portland is known as a very progressive place. And shortly after finding out that this had occurred, I found out that the guy that got killed was actually from Ashland, where I live. And I know his mom, and she's a very unique woman. She has, I think, 6 kids. She's a cancer. The kids are everything to her. She's very strong. She's very passionate. She runs a company called Pacific Domes, which took the ideas of Buckminster Fuller and commercialized them, where her domes appear at events, lots of festivals and events around the world. And it was a very tight-knit family. And they had a couple of memorials up here, which I attended one of them. And, they were heartbroken. They're heartbroken. And Asha is her name. I was amazed because at the memorial, she said, she got in the news, actually, because this was an event that Trump refused to mention. He would not condemn the attack, and he did not mention the victims of the attack. And because she was in the news as the mother of this child, she used that platform first to call on the president to please speak out on this subject, which he didn't do. So what I found going to the memorial was 2 or 3 weeks later, in the meantime, she had founded an organization called We Choose Lev. And that's why I call this talk We Choose Lev, because it felt appropriate, especially given what was going on a couple of weeks ago. Now, You know, she is heartbroken. I did see pictures of her in the paper. She went up and met the survivor, the young man who didn't die. And she went up and found the two young girls that had been harassed on the train, and she shared her condolences with them. And I know Asha that if she had been able to find the guy that did this, who was in jail, she would have felt love in her heart for him, even with all the pain that she was feeling. And to me, that's pretty profound. Uh, there, of course, I'm not denying anything else. I was angry about it. Anyone would feel anger. And as I am continuing, and she did, but she channeled it into something that was more useful than just being angry, just, being resentful and pissed off or depressed or whatever. And she was those things, but she was able to begin to channel it. And I saw one of her kids, the one I know the best, which is not well, but a little bit for a long time. And he told me, it was about a month later, the family's really broken up. I mean, this was a beautiful, I didn't know the son who was killed, but everyone tells me he was a beautiful being. He had love in his heart. He had just graduated from college. He was starting his life. Was a job working as some kind of environmental thing for a better world. And this really ties to the topics I have talked about in these Zoom meetings. I don't remember whether it was one or two talks on these subjects, but it's really what I talk about now, really all I can, and I interweave astrology in it where that's appropriate. And what I want to talk about today, and this is even more, or again, or deeper, on the subject of self-love, self-acceptance, self-nurture. And I get to speak on this because I'm an expert in the opposite of all those things, and has been my lifelong, I don't know if I want to call it a struggle, but definitely issue. And the more that I am learning how to come to deal with those tendencies, I find my life changing slowly but surely. And the more that I see it occurring in me, the more that I realize what those that I have been inspired by have been saying, that this is basically the biggest issue and the source of all the other issues we have on this planet, which at this time, of course, it's an intense time. It's an intense time. I'll share, another anecdotal piece here. The other day on the eclipse day here in Ashland, we got to, from the most accurate statistic I saw, 92.68% of the total eclipse. And I didn't feel called to drive up to what they call the totality, which was like a minimum of 2 to 3 hours from here. And something like, I didn't see the actual numbers, but they were expecting 1 million people to travel to Oregon. for this eclipse, which was like, I can't even conceive of it. It was a big deal. And so my partner and I, we went locally to a big park here. And we couldn't find any eclipse glasses. We called all over the place. They were all sold out a few days before. And instead of going up on a mountain, which was one impulse, we felt like we wanted to be around some other people. And so we sat up, we're sitting on the grass on a blanket, and there was a big party next to us. And Diane, my partner, went over there and started talking with them. And then she came back, and we, not having glasses, made these viewers. We watched a YouTube video with a couple of 10-year-olds explaining how to make a cereal box viewer, which we did, which was awful. You couldn't see anything. And the people that we had talked to, a woman came over and said, "We have some extra glasses. Can we give you, would you like a pair?" And we were like, "Oh my God, yes, yes." And it was, I tell this because it was very touching, because especially in times like this, at least for me, it's easy to believe that things aren't going to work out, or I'm intended to struggle or suffer or whatever. And it was very heartwarming. That's why I told this story. And that's a theme or a realization or what I consider a truth that are going to underlie in what I'm talking about. Because I feel like it's about waking up or remembering that is the actual way life is working, contrary to how it may at times, or even more than a few times, feel. As I've mentioned before, astrologically speaking, was in May of 2016, which interestingly was just at the time when the presidential campaign was picking up steam, like 6 months before the election. And I noticed this formation of Chiron, Neptune, South Node conjunct in Pisces. And that seemed really, really significant to me. I have Chiron rising in my chart, so Chiron is important. And so I was like, what does this mean? And this is when Trump was coming. It was first really revealing the type of character he is and what his beliefs were and what his attitude and approach was. And I have not, I used to have a struggle in my life for a long time with my attempts to fit in, quote, fit in, and who I really am. I have a lot of Libra stuff. It's a big conflict. And I've had many I'll call them non-conventional experiences in the ways that I've lived, and I've had other periods of trying to live more normally, which I like to say just didn't work out. And so it's been interesting as I've begun to realize over the course of my life that the fact that I couldn't, quote, fit in was not some character failing of mine, but rather I couldn't make myself conform to the dictates or standards of external, no matter how I tried. And I was good with that, but I had another side that still judged myself about it. And that's been an ongoing issue. And what's been happening, I talked some about it last time, but even more this time. And what I experienced with that eclipse, I read a lot of things of people having seen a total solar eclipse and it was life-changing and all this. I can't say that my life changed. I can say it was a beautiful thing to see. In a lot of ways, it was almost like astrology in action, living it, seeing it in the sky, making the symbolism, the physical symbolism real. And as it turned out, the degree of that eclipse was at 28, something like 50, Leo, and my Saturn is in early 29 Leo, so it was kind of personally significant for me. And in terms of that Saturn, I felt like, because I considered it, I found that it actually was, what is this, exactly trining Uranus, looking at that right now. I felt it very Uranian. I actually felt it, well, I see Chiron is at 27 Pisces on that day, so that fits into the eclipse too. I felt it very chironic. I felt it was like a portal, like something was opening up, accelerating. I'm really clear that the energies on the planet are changing rapidly. We're meeting our future is coming in. And many of us are called to this. And those of us that are called to this are going through this internal upgrade. And it's what I talked about last time. I called it Operating System Upgrade 2017. Because that's what it felt like to me, like my brain was being rewired. And it's still going on, but it's almost moved. It's even more than that now. And I'm saying all this because I encounter more than a few people, the majority of people, no, but more than a few people that are having these kind of changes in their life. I am having them. And I know at times it can feel very strange. And there's I find a back and forth process where the old parts of me, at times can start freaking out. What am I doing? You know, I'm supposed to be helping here in the world, and I'm spending most of my time sitting in my place. I wouldn't say I'm doing nothing, but not too many people are seeing me. And, I'm not focused on making the absolute amount of money and acquiring this and acquiring that. And what is it? And what is it? And out of these recent events, I'm getting clearer that what I'm doing and what I have been doing is exactly what I'm intended to be doing. And my issues or problem typically start when I start comparing what I'm doing to what other people are doing. People that are out there more, that are saying more, that are getting recognition or acclaim or seem to be expressing their creativity or spirituality. But what I'm learning more and more, I'm doing exactly what I am intended to be doing. And I bring this message when I talk, not to talk about how wonderful I am, but because I encounter this sense of self-doubt or lack of self-confidence, or even if it's not massive, still at times arises, questioning. And I talk about these things to validate, trying with the intent of providing validation that we indeed are, those of you know who relate to what I'm talking about, that this is the path we're intended to be on at this time. And the world around us, and in relation to what I have known, what we have known, you know, right now appears to be going a bit crazy, cuckoo. And I think that there's a lot of truth in that. And it's what I was noticing last year with the Chiron conjunct South Node Neptune. When it came to me in an intuitive flash, this represents, right, and Trump at that time and the things he was talking about and the rising rapport with people who hate, people who have prejudice, etc. That this, in fact, is the shadow, the collective shadow arising. Because part of the reason that we have self-doubt, self-judgment, mistrust, self-questioning, is from our disowned shadow, and also from some of the teachings that we have ingested over the course of our lives, regardless of the source of those teachings. Because they, for the most part, come from teachings of good and bad, right and wrong, superior and inferior. The whole concept of patriarchy, for example, to me is completely that. And ironically, even teachings that are trying to tell us that these things exist and that they're not right, still, most of the ones I've encountered carry judgment in the way they look at it. And I've been understanding or being shown over the last few years that's the same old thing presented in a new way. And there's a new way that's coming in, which is that everything that we're doing is exactly what we need to be doing now. That we even can't do anything wrong. It's all experiences along the way that we require. In my case, I know, well, I have learned, I had my most recent life was in World War II, and it was quite traumatic. I came in, I have an 11th house South Node, trauma, and Chiron rising. And I have been recognizing or realizing in compassion on myself, maybe I'm not here to have this giant life. Maybe I'm here to focus, to give myself space to heal and quiet and peace, at least at this point. And that it's not about having the most followers the biggest selling book, because striving to authentically become, understand who one is like the most profound thing that any of us can do at this time. This is my perspective now on the planet. Because the gist of it is the great majority of people on this planet are inwardly operating from places of doubt, judgment, guilt. I have a friend, a wise friend, who told me that the word God stands for guilt, obligation, and duty. God. That's not really what those have been the teachings. Those have been the teachings. And this is shifting now. And this is where We Choose Lev comes in, because the old ways of responding in judgment, denial, shutting down, anger, and so forth clearly don't work very well. We just can look around and see that. And most of us don't know, well, what else can you do? What other ways are there? And that's what I find. We choose Lev, or I choose Lev. Now, do I choose Lev all the time as my first instinct? Uh-uh. But I become aware. Why am I not choosing Lev? Because I have so much hurt, pain, places where I have felt betrayed, abandoned. But what I'm learning is this is the way that I have perceived things. Because there's a new way that I'm learning to look at things, which is everything that happens is here to help me. This takes the concept of bad karma and, I'm reaping what I sowed, and, that is just, I find now it's just many more ways to beat myself up and to justify staying in the same loop of keeping myself down. And I mean, it may be that I did things that have reactions. There's cause and effect in the universe, but I've just learned there's different ways of looking at things. Some of us, and I've been there and I still am partially there, we experience difficult things and we either get angry because why is this happening to me? Why am I not understood? Why is this person laying all this stuff on me? Or if I learned gradually to look at it in a different way, I'm not enjoying this experience. But since I know that things are here for my benefit, I'll let myself, as best I can, withhold judgment and just notice that I'm feeling really uncomfortable or hurt in what's happening here. And yes, and I'm feeling very angry at this person, and I have a desire to lash back. But I'm noticing that rather than actually doing it. Sometimes I can't help myself, and I let go in the old pattern, and I do let it out. And I can reframe that experience, perhaps not in the moment it's happening, but afterwards, instead of beating myself up about how unspiritual I acted, to look at, well, what was going on in me that brought this up? And it hits places. I believe, we all have sore spots, I'll call it, places in our psyche, in our emotional states, where that have triggered, that have been very painful, that have been very uncomfortable. Sometimes they've been awful. And so the parts of me that want me to survive, hurt child places, really. They can respond, and I can go into a triggered state, a traumatized state, where I'm experiencing the same thing is happening again now. If I was, let's say, harshly verbally abused as a child, I wasn't, but if I was, and somebody starts speaking to me in those harsh tones, it's the impulse to think that it's all happening again and to melt down into a hurt, wounded child place in me is very strong. So again, what I'm learning is, rather than pretending that I'm not in that state and everything's fine, which has been part of my defense system, is to have compassion and understanding for myself. Because really, and the more that I acknowledge it in myself, the more I see it in others, we are all at our core very innocent. I could even see this ironically in some of these very young white, whatever they call it, white supremacist people that I saw interviewed in Virginia. And they're filled with hate and guns and all this. And I could see in some of them where they're so wounded and hurt. I don't condone the way they're looking at it, but I can see they just, out of pain, that's their response. And they have formed community with people. And instead of feeling their own pain, they're projecting it all over everybody else and making other people the scapegoat. And they're the victims that never did anything. And we have a planet like this, and that's why we have a planet that's the way it is. And the only thing I see that over time is going to change it is we choose love. I don't want to hang out with that particular white supremacist, but I don't want to send him hatred, because I don't want to be hateful, and he has enough hate. So I'm not saying go into what we call spiritual bypass and pretend that I'm not feeling what I'm feeling, because I have my own past experiences with, not in this life, with people operating from similar places, and the unbelievable pain and damage that they have inflicted when this gets fired up. And seeing this occurring again in the present time, there are parts of me it scares the hell out of. But I'm coming also little by little to see, and I have spent a good amount of time over the last 5, 10 years, at times feeling afraid of what might be coming. And I think it might be coming. But I'm reframing my experience of it, because it's giving me, if nothing else, an opportunity. It brings up emotions, feelings in me, in my own shadow, that I don't like. And instead of repressing them, or I have the opportunity, instead of repressing them, instead of pretending I'm more evolved than that, and I don't go there, man, that I can recognize that this is in me too. I have a part, honestly, that, would like to pick up some super weapon and just go away. That's my anger. It's my anger at the injustice and the hatred and the unfairness. But I also know that accomplishes very, very little. In fact, it only makes it worse. And that what is more effective in the long run, if not in the short run, is we choose love, or I choose love. One of the nice things about love is I don't have to like what I'm loving. I don't have to like it at all, but I can still love it. Reminds me of a Martin Luther King quote I heard some years ago, not long after Martin Luther King was gone. And someone asked him if he hated his enemies, the racists. And he said, I love my enemy, I hate his deeds. And another way of saying that is, these actions, including our own, including my own, these are not who we are. These are how we have become conditioned through forgetting who we are, who I am, why I am here. Anybody that's listening to this, that's still here, we have a soul mission. Each person's is unique. Very few of us, I would say as a generalization, were raised in environments where anybody knew that, or if anybody did, it's a very small number of people who knew that everyone being born, every child has a soul mission, and who supported the individuating, who nurtured the unfolding of who went to find out what is the soul mission of the children they were raising, which to me is a lot of the value of young parents having astrology readings from soul astrologers with their young children. Although I think we can discern it, if we're paying attention, I think we can discern it intuitively, but astrology can help to unfold this mission. And the more that I remember this, and I'm beginning to get clearer on it, I have plenty of foggy times, but it's getting clearer, that is who I am, and that is why I am here, and that this whole thing, this whole experience, this whole human life thing, in its own way, is kind of a movie. And it's a movie where the people can get killed, they bleed, the pain doesn't feel like a movie, and yet in the big picture, the part we don't remember that we're in a movie, it's a movie. And then it becomes, the issue becomes, how do I respond to the unfoldings, the events, the unfoldings in the movie? When I'm up against, I came here, this is an example of it. So I am, in no stretch of the imagination, not only am I not a supporter of Trump, I can't even listen to him anymore. I can't listen to his voice. I can't. The only thing I want to read is his tweets because they're short to find out what kind of idiocy he has said today. But I was thinking about this and the other day, and I was like, well, what if Hillary Clinton had won the election? So we think things would have been better, or many of us do. And I'm not saying that I don't think they would be better because Hillary is this horrible person. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is Trump has pushed the envelope of what's possible beyond the point I think pretty much anyone has ever conceived that reality could go. So if Hillary had won the election, we would have no concept of how awful it could get with Trump. And sure, as the sun rises every day, the Republican Party would have been tearing Hillary Clinton to shreds from the minute she was inaugurated. That would have been 4 years or 8 years of just hell. And because we didn't have the polarity of Trump as an experience of what an alternative might be, we wouldn't really know what to do with the Hillary and with the reaction to Hillary. I don't have an answer to that. I'm just saying I realized that. It was an observation. So maybe another observation I made was, of all the world leaders, the one who has spoken out the most forcefully to Trump is Angela Merkel, who just happens to be the president or whatever her title is, of Germany, a country that might know a little bit about what happens when you let your country go to crazy extremes. And maybe, I'm not saying I'm looking forward to it, maybe, just maybe, and I'm sure I'm hoping that we're not going to extremes remotely like what happened in Germany. But maybe, just maybe, we have to live through some period of time of this craziness in order to experience what it's like and see what we have to do to keep it from reoccurring. So that became like a different frame for me. As an aside, I hadn't really thought about this, but as most of you, I'm sure, know that the USA Pluto return is 2021-22. And so we're going to be different. It's it can take 5, 10, 20 years after that to figure out what it actually is becoming. I don't know. I have no prediction. But my prediction is we're not going to be the same. And now what's happening now is leading up to that. We're seeing a lot of extremes. Now, it doesn't mean that it's going to be awful. It could be awful for a period of time. It might not be awful. I have to remember also, because everything is here to help me, and I believe for everyone, that whatever our experience is what's intended and necessary and good for our individual souls. Yeah, I had this little anecdote about that, actually. Some years ago, I took my son on a trip when I lived on the East Coast, down to Washington, to sightsee DC and museums and so forth. And we went to Gettysburg, which I had never been to before. And I had known about these battles at Gettysburg and these incredibly heroic things on the mountain where these people had unbelievable valor. Many died. I was amazed to find out after being in Gettysburg that there was an area, you don't hear about this too much. There were areas in Gettysburg where the reserve troops were stationed. And there was, I forget, 100 or 150,000 Union troops over here, and some smaller number of Confederate troops over there. They never fought at all in the middle of this battle. They just were there. They were never called in. And I was like, well, who, you know, who decides who drew the short straws that was in that battle, in that historical battle, and those that didn't have to go through that? And you know, now I look at that, that's an example of how things work. In other words, although, let's say it gets really crazy in this country for a while. I'm not saying it will, I'm saying it could. It also may not happen. But even if it does, whoever is directly involved in that, those are experiences that their soul requires. Whoever is untouched by this, those are not experiences that their soul requires. Now, we can certainly be supportive of those that are in the thick of things, in whatever ways we're intuitively guided to be. And I am quite sure we would. But what this says for me is that it removes a lot of the fear factor for me. And I at times have a lot of fear about it because it triggers memories in me, and it's scary. But in realizing I can't be in a place that I'm not intended to be, and wherever I find myself, that is helping me grow. Miracles happen. People walk out of the most intense battlefields unharmed, and other people, you know, have a different experience. And I'm probably hitting on the concept of battle too much because I don't want to raise. I'm not saying that we're going to have armed conflict all over the place. Because I don't want to raise any level of fear. My point is, wherever we find ourselves and whatever is going on, that is where I make my contribution. And you make your contribution, whether it's in your living room, on your couch, or on a stage before 3,000 people, or wherever you are, in downtown Seattle, or in some 200-person town in Nebraska. We find ourselves where we're intended to be, and we're all serving and participating in raising the energy on the planet. I am pretty clear that we're talking about 100 to 500 year period. I don't know how long. We're going on this planet to, oh yeah, another thing I was recently inspired by was, I think it was the day after the Charlottesville, and the news suddenly cut to these young people in Durham, North Carolina. And they weren't waiting for the legislature to decide to remove statues that are symbols to many people of hatred and enslavement. They knocked the darn thing down themselves. They were young people, of mixed races and nationalities. I got really inspired by that. I had actually a vision. It was like, there's going to be a time coming on this planet in the future where the majority of people realize We've been this whole warlike epic we've been living for thousands of years. Its time is over. Its time is over. And the people are going to voluntarily remove these symbols of division and hate and hatred and past scars. Now, it seems there's always going to be a segment of the population that is resisting and dragging its feet, and they need love too. And I'm not expecting them because, 17 people tell them they love them or care about them that they're suddenly going to have a life-changing episode. A few might, but it doesn't matter because we're talking about souls and we're talking about waking up. And if it takes them, maybe they have a few more lifetimes to go before waking up. But our actions, our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions bring healing to the whole planet. And little by little by little, we will wake up. And there's forward progress and there's the appearance of backward progress. But I think what we're seeing right now, and it's happening around the world, is actually a reaction against or to the energies that are coming in. Because we are going to become one planet. It's going to happen. And since it's going to happen, as far as we're concerned, it's already signed, sealed, and delivered. Thus, at some future point, it has happened, so we don't have to worry about it. That's where it's going. And there will be setbacks, but we just keep moving forward. If I have a major setback and I'm emotionally trashed, and if I need to spend a month, 3 months, 2 years, 4 years, integrating and recuperating, that's okay. That's extreme. I'm talking about that's extreme, but it's okay. It's okay because it's not my job alone to change the planet. Collectively, we're changing the planet, and each one of us is playing a small but necessary and important role in that. And the more that I really get this, get it here, not just here, the more it sinks in, the more I am aligned more of the time with both my passion, my power, my heart, and it's giving me the space and the belief and the confidence to hold my own pain. I haven't really talked about this part, but part of this shift, I got a few minutes, I know. Part of this shift is holding my own spaces, is holding my own shadow. The part of me that I said, could see myself going out and just taking out a bunch of people, that's a part of me that is so hurt. It's so hurt and so sad and so sick of this for so long. And I can hold that space. I don't have to be ashamed of it or glorify it. But I can hold that space and I can hold love for that part of myself that's that hurt. And I can reassure those parts of myself of what I'm learning, that it's all okay. It's going to be okay. It makes sense why you, that part of me, feel so angry, feel so hurt, feel so isolated. It's all based on what you've experienced before. And it's not going to be like that going forward. I will feel like it's happening again, but that doesn't mean it is happening again. I can reframe my experience and realize Martin Luther King in his last night's speech said, I have been to the mountaintop. He had the vision, clearly. He said, we are going to make it to the promised land. He was talking about everyone. And he said, I may not make it with you now, but that's where we're going. And that's essentially what I'm saying. in my not Martin Luther King words. Where we're going is inevitable because it's the truth and the reality of who we all are. And so anything I'm feeling that's not aligned with that is okay. It's not because I'm defective. It's a hurt, conditioned place in me, and the way that I embrace that is loving that part of myself. And little by little, this healing is going on. And I'm still angry a lot of the time, but not as much as I used to be. So I hope that you found some value in what I was talking about, and I appreciate your listening.
Steve, thank you so much. Any comments from the audience?
Beautiful, Steve. Right with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Second what Dawn said.
Third.
And fourth.
Thank you. Thank you for putting your heart and sharing your like personal, collective, and all of us have the same feelings on some level. So I think we're all just trying to evolve our souls, and we all notice things about ourselves. But thank you for being brave enough to share.
Thank you.
There's a comment from Sheila in the chat box. It's by being who we are that we're changing the world, just being.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes. That's what
I love your delivery, Steve. You know, you're so calm and collected, and I think that's probably why we're all just sitting back taking it in. It's a nice feeling.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Steve, thank you.
Not always.
We love listening to you, and so thank you so much. We all choose love. Thank you. And until we see you next time, goodbye from all of us.
Yes. Goodbye to all.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. Perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you.